Number one, rewrite the standard form equation in the vertex form. Now, vertex form is, you need to know this, it's y equals a parentheses x minus h close parentheses squared plus k. Now, if you want to change your standard form equation to a vertex form equation, you obviously need three things. The a, the h, and the k, right? You need those three things. Looking at your standard form, Alexander, pay attention. Looking at your standard form, you could identify the a values -3, but you have a b and a c, you don't have an h and a k. So at the very least, you have the -3 right there. This will be on tomorrow's quiz. It's going to be worth 2 points, I believe. Okay. So a is -3, so far so great. We still need a h and k. H and k really comes from the vertex. So the vertex is a coordinate. We're going to find that coordinate by using -b over 2 times a, which means that we're going to use negative parenthesis over 2 times parenthesis. And when we plug in that b value of -6 right here, and the a value of -3 right there, you will end up with -1, right? Because you end up with 6 over -6, which ends up being -1. So the vertex x value is -1, and you still need the y value. Anytime you have an x and you want the y, all you do is plug it in. So let's plug it in. We're going to have y equals -3 parentheses squared minus 6 parentheses minus 8. And let's plug in that vertex x value of -1. So when we do the math, -1 squared is 1. We have -3 times 1 plus 6, because a -6 times a -1 is a positive 6, minus 8. So it really has -3 plus 6 minus 8. What do we get? -5. So our vertex is -1, -5. Are you with me? Anybody confused about what I'm doing so far? So my vertex is really my h and k. So my h is -1, my k is -5. And once you know the a, the h, and the k, you could plug it all into your vertex form equation over here. So your final vertex form equation is y equals, the a value is -3, x minus h, which is a -1, so a minus becomes a plus, squared plus k, but the k is a -5, so you put a -5. Does everybody understand? That will be on tomorrow's quiz. You need it. Okay, not that exact question, but a very similar question will be on tomorrow's quiz. It's worth 2 points because it takes so long. Here's another one that takes a long time that's worth 2 points as well. Write an equation in vertex form. What is vertex form? Again, it's y equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. And they give you certain things. They give you a vertex, which is really an h value and a k value. And they give you a point, which is really an x value and a y value. So if you want to write an equation in vertex form, what are the three things that we need again? A, h, k. Could you see the a value like on the previous question? No, you can't. We don't know the a. Not right now. Do we see an h or a k? Okay, so we have a -3 for h, +4 for k. All we need is this a value, then we're good. So they don't give us the a. What do they give us? They give us an x and a y value. So what we're going to do is plug in the x and the y. We're going to plug them in right here and here. And then we're going to plug in my h and k right here and here. And we're going to have an equation with just the variable a, which means we'll be able to solve it. The beauty of math is that you could take what they give you to find out what you don't know. So let's plug in every single value. What is y? Y is -5. What is a? We don't know a, so we leave it as a. Times x. What is x? -6. Minus h. What is h? -3. Notice that I put the minus, even though there's a negative right afterwards, because the minus negative is going to have to change. You still have the square on the outside, and you still have plus k. What's k? So plus 4. This is an equation that could be solved, and it'll give us the missing a value that we need. So the minus changes to plus. You know what? Even before simplifying, if I want to get a by itself on the right side, I want to get rid of everything, right? Let's get rid of that 4 first. So let's subtract 4, cancel out, subtract 4. You're going to have negative 9 equals a times, now on the inside of the parentheses, what is negative 6 plus 3? That's negative 3, and of course we're going to square it. What's negative 3 squared? Positive 9. So a times 9 is really 9a. We still have the equal sign, we still have the negative 9. So we need to do our final step here, which is divide by 9, divide by 9, negative 1 equals a equals negative 1. So we now have our a, our h, and our k. We now could actually write our equation. So let's write it out here. We have y equals, the a value is negative 1, x minus h, which is negative 3, plus k, which is the plus 4. There's our equation, but let's just clean it up a bit. I want to change the minus minus to plus plus. You could leave it as a minus sign if you wanted to, or you could put the 1 in front. It's up to you. I like having the negative 1 out there in the front. So anyways, this is a nice answer right there. You're going to have one of these on tomorrow's quiz. It's worth 2 points because it takes so long. Oh yeah, by the way, we were supposed to, it says right here, please name it g of x. So final touch is change that y to a g of x. That's just the name.
Wait, don't name it g of x.
Name it g of x. Now I just told you name it g of x, so on the next instruction it'll make sense. So look at number 3. It says rewrite the g of x function above in standard form. So they want you to take this guy and write it in standard form. Now what is standard form? It's y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. As you can see, standard form does not have parentheses the way Vertex form does, right? So if you want to get rid of the parentheses, you have a binomial and it's squared, you're going to have to rewrite this binomial 2 times and distribute combined like terms, do the math, and then the parentheses disappear. So let's understand this, guys. When you're about to simplify negative 1 times parenthesis x plus 3, close parentheses squared, plus 4, you're really doing 3 things. You're multiplying, you're doing exponents, and you're doing addition. Which one do you deal with first? Exponents. So we need to take this binomial and multiply it with itself before anything else. So let's go x plus 3 times x plus 3. You're going to distribute and combine like terms. X times x, x squared. X times 3, 3x. 3 times x, 3x. 3 times 3, 9. So my quadratic trinomial in blue will be x squared plus 6x plus 9. Now check this out, guys. So far all I've done is this part. So I still need to multiply by negative 1 and add 4. What do I do first? Multiply or add? Multiply. So I need to take this quadratic trinomial and multiply it by negative 1. So that's going to change all the signs. And I still have the plus 4 at the very end. So let's change all the signs. It's going to be a negative x squared minus 6x minus 9. And now at the very end, you add 4. And of course, you're only going to be able to combine the negative 9 with the 4. So your final answer is y equals, oh no, they wanted us to write it as g of x. G of x equals negative x squared minus 6x minus 5. That's your answer for number 3. I apologize for the lack of space.
No.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be on the quiz tomorrow as well. All this is going to be on the quiz tomorrow. So let's also understand this, guys. We wrote this g of x function in standard form right here, and we also wrote it in vertex form up here. It doesn't matter which one you use to answer the following questions. Some are easier to use than others. Like number 4, state the axis of symmetry. Well, the axis of symmetry is always going to be x equals the x value of your vertex. So which one are you going to look at? This one or this one? The vertex form, right? So what's your axis of symmetry equation going to be based off of this? Negative 3. X equals negative 3. Simply think opposite on h. That's your equation of the axis of symmetry. Number 5, state the x-intercepts of the above g of x function. How do you find the x-intercept anyway? you set what? Set y equal to 0 and solve. So which one do you think would be easier to work with? Remember, g of x is really y. So would it be easier to set this equal to 0 or set this equal to 0 and solve? Either one. Let's go with standard this time since we use the vertex on the other one. So here is your y value. We're going to put a 0 right here. So this equation is just going to read negative x squared minus 6x minus 5 equals 0. But you can put the equal 0 on this side if you'd like. And that's what I'm going to do. Negative x squared minus 6x minus 5 equals 0. Now the beauty of an equation is that you can do whatever you want to an equation as long as you do it to all the terms to both sides. So let's divide everything by negative 1. That way it'll make them all positive. And the 0 divided by negative 1 will be negative 0, but it's still 0. So what we have here, guys, is x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0 if you divide everything by 0. Let me zoom in right here. I could solve this. I could use the quadratic formula if I want. But what's better to use? Factoring. What times what is 5 that if you combine together is 6? Positive 5, positive 1. Now if you split them and solve, x plus 5 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, and you solve both of them, what are your two answers going to be? Negative 5 and negative 1. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what they're asking for, the x-intercepts. The x-intercepts are negative 5 and negative 1. Number 6, state the y-intercept. How do I find the y-intercepts? Set x equal to 0. And we are still dealing with that g of x function. So I'll tell you what, setting x equal to 0 is the easiest thing in the world if you're dealing with the standard form. Because if you set this guy, the x values, if you set them equal to 0, what's your answer going to be? Negative 5. It's going to simply be your c value. So that's like a ridiculously easy question to do. So let's set x equal to 0. That's negative x squared minus 6 times x minus 5. Put a 0 right in there. Your y-intercept will be negative 5. That's your answer for that one. State the max or min value of the g of x function. For this one, I think I'm going to go with the vertex form. So we need a max or min value. Now, first of all, if this is negative, what does that tell you about the parabola? Does it open up or does it open down? Down. So are you going to have a maximum or minimum? Max, right? If it's opening down, it's going to go up, up, up. It's going to reach a max height, and then it's going to come back down. So if it's opening down, it definitely has a max. And how do we state the max? It's simply going to be the y value of your highest point, which is your vertex. So what's the max at? At y equals what? 4. Because after all, hk, this is the y value of your vertex. So your max is at y equals 4. State the domain and range. The domain are all your x values, and the domain will always be x equals all real numbers on any parabola. Doesn't matter if it's wide, narrow, opening up, or opening down. The range is either going to be above or below a certain y value, and it's technically the highest. You could actually answer this by thinking about your max value. If your max value is 4, so your y has to be at 4 or below 4. So you would say y is less than or equal to 4. That's your range. Now you could have gone back to the equation and thought, okay, you could have sketched it if you wanted to and said, okay, my h is negative 3, my k is 4. So you could go negative 3, 4, that's up here. I know my a value is opening down, right? So you could have sketched it. This would definitely be your max value at 3, 4. That's why your max value is at 4. Anyway, your range would be y is less than that 4, less than or equal to that 4. There's one more question that wasn't on this worksheet that I would like to cover, is state the transformations from the parent graph to the g of x function. So this is something I want you to add on, maybe on the back of your worksheet or at the bottom of your worksheet. We want to state the transformations from your parent graph to the g of x function. So let's first start by saying, what is the parent graph? The parent graph is y equals x squared, or f of x equals x squared. That's your regular parabola pattern 112439 has a vertex at the origin, and you want it to go to the g of x function. So here's our g of x function. So what transformations does this go through? Well, first you look at the a value. That -1, what does it do to this parent graph?
Reflects over here.
Reflects. It makes it open down. It reflects it over the x-axis. That's your first transformation that you want to describe. Reflects over the x-axis. And then after that, we have an h and k shift. Obviously, this vertex can't stay at the origin. Your vertex is going to be -3, +4. So if your vertex goes to -3 and +4, this blue parabola is going to be -3, +4 up here, where your vertex would be at -3, +4, and it's opening down. Does that make sense? So this red one's not it. This red one's not it. This is the final one that's opening down right there. So we need to describe that final transformation. So we're going to say the second thing that happens is shifts 3 to left and 4 up. All right, so I didn't put that on the worksheet, but you do need to be able to describe transformations. Let's move on up here. One question is going to be on graphing the inequality. All you got to do is graph it like if it were any parabola. But before you draw your parabola, you got to decide if it's solid or dotted. And then in addition to that, you need to know where to shade. So this one's really easy to graph because you could clearly see the vertex. What's a vertex? So let's go to -2 and +1, 2, 3, 4. Put a dot right there. Let's draw our axis of symmetry. Going right through it. We need more points. What could we do? Because the a value is, well, -1, doesn't matter if it's 1 or -1, you could use a pattern 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9. So what does that mean? That from the vertex I go 1 over and 1 up or 1 down? Down, because a value is negative. So 1 over, 1 down. Let's put a dot right there. Go back to the vertex. 2 over, 1, 2, 3, 4 down. And right here it's kind of weird. We end up at the origin. Then go back to the vertex. 3 over, 1, 2, 3, 9 down. That's 4 all the way down to here. Put a dot right there. And of course, map your dots to the other side of the axis of symmetry. And of course, this parabola, is it going to be solid or dotted? Dotted, because there's no solid line underneath the inequality. So we're going to go dotted. Now you need to shade because it's an inequality. So are you going to shade to the inside or the outside? You need to test the point. Now this is why it's weird. Most of the time we test 0, 0, right? But 0, 0 is on the parabola itself. It's kind of like standing right in the middle of a teeter-totter. It's not going to go one way or the other, right? So we need to pick a point that's clearly either on the inside or the outside. So I'm going to pick this point right here. I want to do it in yellow, right there. What is that coordinate? That coordinate is -2, 0. So I'm going to test -2, 0. That means I'm going to put a -2 for the x, and I'm going to put a 0 for the y. So rewriting this guy and testing -2, 0, instead of my y, I'm going to put 0. It's going to be less than minus, open parenthesis, instead of x, I'm going to put -2, but then there's a +2 squared plus 4. Now inside the parentheses, -2 plus 2 is 0. 0 squared is 0, -0 is 0, plus 4 is 4. So you really have 0 is less than 4 when you test the coordinate -2, 0. What do you say about that? Is that true or false? True. That is true. So this point in here, it's true, it works, it's a solution. That means that all my solutions are in here. So you're going to have to shade in everything on the inside of the parabola. So all your answers are on the inside, none of your answers are on the outside. You're going to have one of those on tomorrow's quiz. Now, right here on number 2, it tells you to use these below steps. So if you're struggling with this, go through all these steps to be able to answer this quadratic inequality. So step 1 says to treat it like an equation. So you really have a negative x squared minus 8 equals 6x. We're going to get rid of the 6x by subtracting 6x. You're going to end up with negative x squared minus 6x minus 8 equals 0. Now, you could make this nicer by dividing everything by negative 1 to make everything positive, and the 0 doesn't even get affected. So you really have x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. Now, you could use the quadratic formula. It always works. We could also factor, split, and solve. And right here I am going to factor, split it, and solve. What times what is my c value 8 that if I combine together is my b value 6? 4 and 2. Now again, it's still equal to 0. We're going to split it. X plus 4, that could equal 0. X plus 2, that could equal 0. So if we continue solving, we'll get x equals negative 4. That's one answer. And x equals negative 2. That's another answer. So the next step that's written below, it says to go to your x-axis, your x number line, and plot those values. So if you plot negative 4 right here, negative 2 would obviously be closer to the positives. And where would the 0 be at? It would be right here. 0 would be right here. That's just a sketch, which means if that's 0, that means that the y-axis is right through that 0 value, okay? So there's your sketch of an xy plane. And what we need to do is sketch our parabola, determine what it looks like based off of this a value being negative 1. So if it's negative, that means that it opens down. And we know that if these are the answers and it's opening down, your parabola is going to be going like this, okay? And since we're sketching, it's not too important if we're accurate. And right here, we know it's not going to be a solid parabola. It's going to be a dotted parabola. So let me just do a dotted sketch of a parabola like this. And that's it. Now we need to determine if the answers are on the inside or the outside. So you do that by testing a point. I want to test 0, 0. And if I test 0, 0, let's see what happens. Plug in 0 on the x's. So you test the zeros, you're going to end up with 0 minus 8. It's going to be a minus 8. 6 times 0 is 0. So what you really have is minus 8 is less than 0, and that's absolutely true. So this point out here does work, which means that it is an answer. That means that your answers are on the outside of the parabola. So if you start shading in the outside of the parabola, I want to do it with a highlighter. Shade in the outside of the parabola. So the answers are on the outside. Now, because this is an inequality that does not have y values involved, it's just x, you don't have to think about the whole xy plane. You just got to think of the x number line. So when you zoom in on that x number line, do we have areas that are together or apart? They're obviously apart. It's not together. So it's apart, which means that you have to write these answers as inequalities that are separated with the word or. So you really have the negative 4 that way, which is less than negative 4. So you have x is less than negative 4, or x is greater than negative 2. So there's the answer with the word or right between it. So I hope this will help you get prepared for tomorrow's quiz. Good luck.